So let's leave behind the screens and move on to this side of the stage, because we are moving on to the round tables or panels. All the speeches we've heard so far give a frame to the discussions that we will be seeing and hearing from now on, with the interruption by a break for a coffee. Let me call the participants of the next panel. If they could come up to these chairs. This is the first panel on sustainable production and bringing that production to the market. Can Pedro Gallardo, Rosa Bañó, Maricruz Vaca, who's also here, Samuel Juarez, could you just stand here to my left? Pedro, let me organize all of them. Rosa next, Maricruz, and Bruno. Let me introduce the members. Samuel Juarez Casado is a veterinary and advisory member of the General Secretariat for Agriculture and Food, Ministry of Agriculture. He was formerly an advisor in Galicia. He's been minister in the Chinese and American embassies. He has worked on agricultural policies, very involved in international policies constantly. Is that not the case? And well, some policies. Thanks very much for being here today. My pleasure. Pedro Gallardo is an a farmer, cereals, soya, not soya, and wheat and sunflowers. He's a member of Asaja organization, vice president of the COPA, and he's also vice president of ALAS, the Alliance for Sustainable Agriculture. Welcome, Pedro. Thanks very much for letting us be here today, sharing this very interesting debate. Rosa Bañó has a degree in business administration. She worked in Coca-Cola, and 20 years ago is a long time. Don't say 20 years. She started her project for extra virgin olive oil in her family company, Castillo de Camela. She's developed this company with great success. And 20 years ago, she was already very well known in the olive oil sector, and she's exporting her olive oil to more than 70 countries. Welcome to this forum. Thanks very much. And next is Maria Cruz Vaca Escribano, graduated in economy. She's director of economic affairs at the National Organization for Large Distribution Companies. In this ANGEP Association, there are big distribution chains like Alcampo, Carrefour, Eroski, and El Corte Inglés, among others. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here. Thanks very much for your invitation. And last but not least is Bruno Capucci, holds a degree in international relations, holds a master in law from the World Trade Organization. Since 2019, she's working in Brussels at the Brazilian Agency for Investment and Trade Promotion, Apex Brazil. Bruno, thanks very much. So these are our participants in this roundtable. Let me say that in the last minutes, we will open a round of questions to the audience in case you wish to ask anything or you have any doubts. We will have some colleagues bringing your wireless mics, and we will need you to introduce yourselves and say the name of your company or the organization that you represent. The president of the forum, Janet Potocnik, just explained that the future will need to be green or there will be no future for us. The political goal of the current EU presidency is the Green Deal. We also mentioned the Green Deal, and the Green Deal has translated in the policies like Farm to Fork or the 2030 biodiversity strategy. So for many years in Europe, we've been committed to more sustainable food. And let's begin now with the question. The first question is to Samuel. We will try to go from the more general to the more specific. How do you believe, Samuel, that this sustainability vision in Europe for sustainability of agricultural, stock farming production, how do you think this is affecting the international trade? Sustainable products are welcome in other countries, in third countries? Is the question. Are they welcome in Chinese or the United States? How do they see these policies in other parts of the world? Well, I believe that sustainability in production and in all areas of economy is not negotiable. It is not a negotiable factor. It is a need on which there is no debate. The debate is mostly about the how, the pace, and that is where we are at the moment. With regard to trade, I believe that those products that can accredit to have been obtained in a way that is more in accordance with the preservation of the environment, they will have a plus. In the future, probably in the present, it will also be a competitive element, as is today the health quality of our products. But we need to remember that we need to be competitive if we want to export. So a balance between these demands and the possibilities of the companies to adapt and the idea of continuing to produce in a competitive way, those factors are of the essence. Sustainability should be based on the three facets, the environment, the economy, and the society. I also think that the markets have the American, the Chinese markets. They have very few elements to discriminate what products have been obtained in a sustainable way. There are not so many international standards, ecological products labeled, for example. There are no specific international organizations that deal with the negotiation of standards in this respect. So this is an element of difficulty. Even within the internal market, I think that within the EU, some order is needed. There are many attractive aspects that we or attractive propaganda that we don't know what is behind really. In the environmental appealing messages from companies addressing the public, but there needs to be something behind. This environmental invocation needs to be truthful. It needs to refer to the whole product, not just the part. And there needs to be some way to obtain evidence about that that supports what is being given to the citizens. So there are aspects missing. I think there is a lot of work to be done at EU level and at international level so that the sustainability attributes can make a difference. Pedro, I noticed that you were noting sustainability from the viewpoint of the cooperative owners or partners or the landowners. Is it a plus for trading, for the market? We've been sustainable for many years. The new idea that we are now fostering sustainability, but we never did before, is not appropriate. I think we've always been sustainable since the reform of the CAP. These strategies were launched as a communication of the Commission. They were meant to be introduced in the different strategic plans of the CAP, sometimes forcing them to be included. we are now being confirmed that we were right, given the situation with the war in Ukraine, the drought in Spain. We've always said it clearly. We could do a more sustainable agriculture, a greener agriculture, if we had the money. Gabriel Calleja mentioned the budget of the CAP, the budget for Europe, and I remember that before the reform, the McSherry, I think it was, we were taking approximately 70% of the community funds. The last CAP, we were at close to 40%. With the reform, we will be at close to 34%. So Europe is fostering these strategies, but not supporting the farmers and the cooperatives. So they're delocalizing the production because they're not helping this sector enough, maintain the sector. I'll give you some examples. In the last 40 years, we need 50% less land for a ton of tomato. We use 36% less water and 13% less energy resources. So the farmers have adapted themselves. Farmers have done their homework, but we truly need European legislation supporting us. Plus, this is a global world. Europe cannot act as an island because sustainability is good, but on the three pillars, as Samuel said, but we need to do it at global level. We have very high standards in Europe, which is not the case in other areas of the world. But we want legal guarantee. We want a scientific base as well. If something is good, it will be good everywhere in the world. And sometimes when European agencies say that something is good, we should not doubt. We should not hesitate. Ignacio López is here. He's reminded me of this many times. Spain is a laboratory for Europe. We're doing things that Europe will need to do in the next few years because the climatic change, the plagues, the diseases that we are suffering begin from the south, closeness to Africa, temperature, imports from third countries, and this application of agriculture will be copied by Central Northern Europe. But we cannot have the same directive for sustainable use, in this case, for example, in a linear way in Europe. It's like if tomorrow we said the average of energy consumption is this in Europe, and you from Scandinavia, you from Spain, you will need to use the same energy. But the Scandinavian countries have to use twice as much energy for heating, for example. Same for plagues. Spain cannot be on the average. And if they want to put a limit to the tools that farmers use, then at the end of the day, my question is, why don't they do the same with medicines? If they limited 50% of medicines from now till 2050, then surely people will be demonstrating in the streets. So this is what farmers should be doing. Say no, because we want to produce. So you are the opposed voice in this panel. Sometimes I feel like our authorities forget how big the population of the world is. The United Nations said that there would be 9 billion by 2020. There'll be over 9 billion in 2050. Africa is going to triple its population in the next years, and Europe will need to be solidarious. We cannot say we will be the greenest of the world, but let's only look at ourselves, Europe. Europe will need to produce for third countries. It will need to be solidarious. We saw that in the 80s, people starving in Africa for lack of food. We will need to do that out of 2 billion people. They will have, from 2 million people, they will move to 4 in Africa. So there'll be a need for food. Now, we want to generate food for that, so that there is no starvation in the world. So let's move on to the next voices in this panel. Rosa, I like to sit on the side. because it's like I'm controlling them. I take notes, but I can see them. I see their gestures, and I saw that Rosa and Maricruz were nodding when Pedro said, we cannot be an island in the world because the markets are global. Rosa, given your great, extensive trade experience, you sell your oil to more than 60 countries. European sustainability in food, does it give us an advantage? Just to build on what you said before and add a commercial business view. I'm lucky to have a company that is very advanced when it comes to the agricultural plans that the EU is putting forward. We do regenerative agriculture, for example, but there is something we always forget. The consumer needs to be aware of everything we do, and I think we are late in communication from the point of view of how we will be certifying. Everybody talks about sustainability. Every company without any certification talks about sustainability. Everybody's sustainable. There is this information. Really, I think we are late. The EU should demand from all of us, and I think we will agree on that, this idea that the future is green, but at the same time, there needs to be some capacity for consumer communication or communication to consumers. Number one, to explain what the reality is behind the certifications, and also the consumer should be aware of that added value, should be capable of recognizing that. I've never had a situation when I went to present to distributors and they asked me for my green certification. They never asked me for that. They ask for prices, for added value, for the awards that we receive, the quality of my oils, etc. But I have those accreditation, and I would like to say this is undisputed. But I never have a situation, and I want them to give me the situation. I want the consumers. I want my consumers to say, I am sustainable. My suppliers are sustainable, so come buy from me, because green is the future. Maricruz, we have to be sustainable. In some forums, we're beginning to hear that consumers have to pay the amount that citizens demand. So we need to be aware that as citizens, we want a blue sky, green grass, clean water, but we also need to think about what to buy as consumers. So from Ángel, how do you see the sustainability, this demanding productivity? How does your association view this? Well, as an association with the companies you mentioned, our partner companies, we've been many years working with them. Many of them have been pioneers in the introduction of ecological products, the introduction of quality seals, our original quality seals. I'm surprised that you're not asked about the green seals, because these are being applied. We have a sustainability report since 28. We've been producing these reports, and we have the number of. I'm not talking about the 60 countries that I work with. Well, from that point of view, I think that companies are making an effort to offer this alternative as one more alternative. It is in the DNA of the RGF companies. They can allow, given their size, they can allow to offer different products in their variety of in their assortments. But if you are asking about the acceptance of these products, whether consumers are prepared to pay more for differentiated products, well, in a quantitative survey, they will always say yes. They will pay 30, 50% more. But when we look at the data, the stubborn data, these data say that the first reason why they choose a product, especially now after all that we have experienced, the first factor is price. The first factor or reason for choosing an establishment is 70% price, 40%. 40% of these cases, it is because the consumers are more sensitive to that increase in price. They believe the quality might be different as well. But I agree with my predecessors when they say that there's no seal guaranteeing an effective international seal guaranteeing this quality. Secondly, this is an open world. We see this, and we need to be aware that the Spanish consumers have not increased their income in the last 20 years. And in addition to consuming food products, they want to go out and they want to spend money, spend savings in other things. So we need to be efficient enough so that we can offer both things, the differentiated quality, sustainability, and an attractive price. Bruno, you are taking part in the last place, because here we've been talking about what we want and what is being brought forward from Europe. You normally work in Brussels, so you know it very well, but you also know the feelings and the desires of other parts of the world, like your country, Brazil. So how are these approaches seen in agricultural production, in the production of food from the other side of the Atlantic? Is the Green Deal understood in Brazil?
At Apex Brazil, as you know and you mentioned, we try to translate the regulatory scenario and the shifts in the EU to Brazilian exporters and try to find synergies from this part. And I had just arrived in Brussels almost 4 years ago when the Green Deal was announced as the Europe's man on the moon moment by the European Commission. And I believe that in the beginning, almost everyone was a little bit astonished by the comprehensiveness and the innovative approach that the Green Deal was offering. But as the propositions and the strategies that were being developed, I understood that there were actually much more room for cooperation and for Brazil for keep being a provider of sustainable products and solutions to Europe than I had imagined before. And I'm thinking initially here, the cases in Brazilian low-carbon agriculture, that Brazil had to reinvent its agriculture in the 70s from being a net importer of food to be one important player in agricultural markets. But we can go back to the low-carbon agriculture a little bit later, because you mentioned the Green Deal and its perceptions from other countries, and I wanted to touch a little bit on its measures, because as we know, the Green Deal is not an inward-looking approach, so because it has a more holistic approach and try to influence the whole preservation of the environment as a whole. And I think that's one first distinction that's important to be made, that countries, they're fully entitled to regulate products they import for preserving animal life and plant health. This is well agreed by international agreements and by countries. However, if regulations, they go a little bit beyond that to regulate how to produce and how to manage resources in third countries, then I think that we might be talking about something a little bit different. And why? Because we have a rules-based trade system, right? We still have the WTO and the GATT agreements, which are the reigning agreements for the trade integration. And why I'm mentioning trade so strongly, because trade is not a means by its own, but I'm sorry, it's not the objective by its own, but it could be used as a means for economic development, economic integration, and for greening our economies. And I can give some more details of some ideas how we see that in a little bit. But still a little bit on the measures, if I can. So after we have established system of a rules-based system for trading, I cannot autonomously tell other countries how I believe that what is good for me and what makes sense in the context of my society to rule that to other countries in other societies, in other contexts, in other stages of development, and especially if I look to one of those measures, the deforestation regulation. If I try to create a list of countries ranging from lower to higher risk of deforestation, there are two main things that come to my mind. How is this list is going to be made? We will use exactly the same criteria in all cases. This we don't know yet by what is given by the agreed text. And is it fair to compare countries in this way, or I can have some room to discrimination? Let's give an example. Let's take Congo, which has 68% of its territory covered by a rainforest in one context, in one development context, and we could compare it, I was going to say Monaco with zero forest, but let's take Argentina, that actually exports some of the products of the deforestation regulation, which has 11% of its territory covered by forests as well. Are these countries in the same context? Are these countries, could they put together in the same rule for comparison? Could this rule of comparison create some possibilities for discrimination? I think that these are some of the discussion that we have to come when we're going to be closer to the implementation of these regulations.
No sé si tenéis algo que añadir.
I don't know if you have something to add or something you would like to comment about. Well, basically, I agree that there are trade rules. It is good that they should exist. We all know in all international forums that these rules should go beyond. We need to move forward in trade realities, and we know that countries should not interfere in how other countries regulate their environment unless these environmental consequences have a global repercussion and they affect us, all of us. So this is the only thing that would justify environmental demands to other countries. So this makes it complicated sometimes to apply rules on imports that are similar to those that are demanded within the European Union. And it is, justified complaints by producers, really. They rightly complain in this respect, and we need to be careful in this balance between the competitiveness of our production and the demands that we give to the producers and the value chain. It is not only this mirror law, but we are competing with third countries as producers. So at the end of the day, we lose sustainability, economic and social sustainability, because we are not competing on the same level play field, really. So it's not just that they should do the same as I do with them, but we are also competing with producers outside, and something that has been repeated. If we are against our own producers and we cause internal production to be reduced with inappropriate pay, we will be favoring production in other countries that are not performed with the same environmental standards. So we are not achieving any goals at global or planet level. And as I said before, we cannot dispute the final goal, which is being more sustainable. But we can dispute about how to achieve this, how can this not go against the environment? Because we could make things worse.
If you let me, this year we have seen an achievement in Spain for the legislation for the tax into plastic, that in the moment where consumers needed for the prices to be reduced, because all the reasons that you all know, because of the energy crisis, the war that also affected to the cereal supply chains, a plastic tax that didn't need to be this year, because comparing with other European countries, we have been the first ones to apply this tax. Why do we begin in Spain? Because we need to be aware that we are the first producing country of the more common products. So we can know we are the 8th country exporting globally. So I encourage you to continue doing this discussion. So I wanted to go again to an issue that you have already introduced, is the one of the mirror clauses. During the French presidency, we have talked a lot about that. Is the products to be produced as the European Union would like, demands? So Samuel and Pedro, I need to ask you both, is this something feasible? Can we tell the others how to produce? Well, I think that these clauses, a basic issue is the scientific evidence. That would be the first question. We cannot doubt when a scientific association, global association that is made up from officers that are evaluating a substance and say that that's like that, and we need to accept it. So firstly, the scientific evidence. Spain is a country where his food economics are positive. We export more than import. And of course, always doing it with the Global Economic Association. And we say that we cannot have different rules in dramatic moments for agriculture. We have seen from third countries from the south of Spain. We have seen cereal coming when we were harvesting in Spain that decreased the prices with many substances that are banned in Europe. So these are limiting the Spanish farmers. And I come from Cádiz, where we have important fisheries. So the farmer doesn't agree with all that. We need to keep producing, and we cannot play soccer with different rules in each part. We need tools. The climate change is telling us that in order to battle against those plagues, we need more tools, because in the world we are seeing many disasters as the drought that we are having now, also plagues. I know one plague in El Alcornoque at Cádiz, where a third of the area is affected and is going to be dried, and maybe we will have some fires in the summer, and that's a risk for the farmers. But if we do not have tools in order to control the plagues, that are the negative consequences in Europe. But in Africa, these treatments are permitted. So Samuel, in order to continue with the mirror clauses, so the International Trade Commission, what's his role in here? Well, we have some agreements that enables us to ask for sanitary conditions due to the effects upon the human health, and also how the food has been produced, or all the environmental requirements. And if we cannot demonstrate a harm for the human health, we cannot require those measures. There's a report from the European Commission, And conclusions is that each case needs to be studied. But I think that obviously when we make some requirements to our producers, we need to evaluate if we can require that for other countries, because sometimes we do not apply those requirements, and what's the influence for our production, because maybe we can lose competitiveness and our production is substituted for external production, so we are not achieving anything from the environmental part. Rosa, do you all think the same as Pedro? Yeah, I do. I think that we need to be more coherent with the requirements than that we ask externally. It is not coffee for all. Spain has needs and crops and climates that are different, and we need to be realistic and take realistic decisions. So we do not need to be the first to be in the photograph. We need to be aware that decisions taken affect to many more things that we believe. So I do agree that we need to be careful in order for not harm ourselves. So we need to be more serious. So I would like to ask Maricruz, because we are talking about sustainability in the production, but supply chain is bigger. So thanks to work of many people, we are not only talking about production, we are talking about industry, distribution. It is a huge system, so we need to take into account when we are talking about food and feeding. So along that change, how can we improve that sustainability? What are the distribution companies doing in order for that to be greener, more sustainable, and compatible with the environment? Or it depends on the countries. Well, the first thing I would like to say, I think that trading, we have been I mean the trade has been the bad part of the supply chain, but we have been several months explaining what is our added value for this change, that is only to make contacts between the consumer and offering the consumer the best products at the best price. We cannot forget that. So the value change in Spain is odd because we have an agriculture that produces the double of what we need, so we export half of our production. So the price is acquired on exports. So we have a food industry that is divided, and also we have a trade that is more organized each time, and thanks to that, we can see that everything that we have said during so many years, that we were trying, that we were talking with the most productive part, because we needed value chains more sustainable in time. So these measures taken in a more efficient commerce, we see that really this change is more profitable. So we have seen it in the last price crisis from the increasing of prices from the production part that also has been applied to the industry for the consumer. There are a difference of many points. So the change has been efficient alongside that line. So in order to be sustainable, what we need to take into account is we need not so many norms. We need them to be clear. We have a food change that it is not clear enough in order to defend ourselves. We have been saying this since this has been approved. When it has been amended, there are parts that are not transparent enough, as the cost definition, that a negotiation from a farm has the same approach than a big industry. And from yesterday, you know that FENIL has asked the Supreme Court in order to, because they cannot apply, they need to buy to the production line below the price.
No, let's not move on to the food chain, because this is another topic. I know it is not the core of the discussion, but we need to take into account that this regulation, when this regulation was created, it should have included an impact assessment in order for the regulation to be applicable and respectable. Bruno, I think you wanted to add a few things to make trade more sustainable, as well as the distribution chain of food. Last night you were saying that you would like to say something about this.
To make a quick comment before that, but in what my colleagues were talking about the mirror clauses, that I think that if we make a round of questions here to the six of us, what is sustainability? I think that each one of us will have a slightly or to some extent bigger difference on our own definitions, because it's one of those concepts that even though we might be thinking, we might be saying about the same thing, when we have to define it, we all have our own views on what's best from us to that, compared to our history. So if the six of us will have a slightly different view, I believe if we extend that to all societies in all countries, I think we would have a big spaghetti ball. And that to say that there are no good standards or bad standards. They are the standards that have been agreed by societies, because each society, they agree and they can afford the different standards. And I'm not even thinking of Brazilian producers, but in a context, possible context in the future in which standards might be popping out in different parts of the world, small producers that sell coffee, let's say in Kenya or Ecuador, they would have the difficulties to engage into those markets, and we to have coffee here in Europe. So I think that this is also a more holistic view to the sustainability challenge in the chain, and then I'm getting to the chain to your question. Because I think that although buyers and sellers, they are on opposite sides of economic transaction, but they are on the same part of facing the challenges of preserving the environment. And I'm not even going to put from an ideological perspective of seeing that the preservation of the environment should be a public international good. Yes, that is true, but it's from a rational and economic logic. So if I create barriers and standards that cannot be met by my suppliers, I might be putting into risk their well-being and my well-being. And buyers and sellers, they're altogether part of the solution. I remember what the Vice President Gabriel was mentioning, that sometimes farmers, they are perceived as the problem when they're actually part of the solution, and I completely agree with that. With measures of sustainability in the farms, the farmers, they should be listened to because they are the ones that are going to have to comply to the regulations and to get to a more sustainable way of trade. I'm sorry, I get a little bit too long, but two last comments. How to make trade greener? Science and complementarity. So in the science aspect, for example, as I mentioned in the beginning, Brazil has shifted from being an importer to an exporter of food with science. Brazil has an integration of livestock, crop, and forest that creates a bigger system of sinking and keeping carbon in the soil with increased yields of productivity. So we are actually saving to increase agricultural production in more land, while we are capturing more carbon and increasing productivity of grains and beef, and complementarity of our chains. I think that I think I will stop here, and then because I'm digging too long, sorry.
Thank you. Pedro me había pedido la palabra, creo que te va a responder.
Pedro, I wanted to take the floor as well. I think he's probably going to answer your comments. Well, I partly agree with Bruno and Maricruz. The perception of agriculturists, of farmers, is that lawmakers are legislating without looking to the fields, from beautiful offices in Madrid, in Brussels, wherever, very often without taking into account the farmers, without having agriculture at the center, at the core of the discussion. We have reinforced conditionality, which is affecting European producers, by which, well, this is probably good for Central Europe from now on. When we have a harvest, we cannot take our tools to the fields because they could be detrimental to the fields. But if we wait until September to bring our tools to the fields, my land at least is going to be wasted. A tractor probably uses twice as much fuel and as many tools, just as a consequence of the transposition of a European law. You cannot legislate without going to the fields. And this relates to what Maricruz mentioned about the plastics. This is affecting us, and we are asking the administrations for that, the governments for that. We want them to hear us. We want them to come to the fields. All the years that I've been in agriculture have been different from each other. So I am complaining about the lack of sensitiveness from the lawmakers. Samuel, is there anything you would like to add? I understand what Pedro says. He is right. We are at the beginning of a new CAP. There is a strategic plan containing some new incentives for farmers adopting more environmentally friendly practices. About CO2, biodiversity preservation, etc. Conditionality is one part of this environmental body of the new CAP. It is new, and since it is new, it needs some process to be implemented. And we've had an exceptional year, so we've needed to touch a few things already, so that there is good readiness to continue to adapt to the demands, to the requirements, such that above all we can give incentives to a situation where farmers can produce in a more environmentally friendly way, more sustainable way. It is not the intention of the CAP to create difficulties or obstacles for farmers. The idea is that we should all go towards a production that is more productive in the long term, with fewer instruments, fewer tools, with the idea of feeding the population in the future with worthy income for farmers. We should always take into account that this is the objective. These are the objectives of the CAP. These are the pillars of the CAP. Sometimes we hear debates that make us forget about this, but the main goals of the CAP are the same. They've never been derogated to feed the population with worthy income for farmers. Samuel, Yeah, that is true. We agree with each other to a large extent, but what farmers perceive is more and more limitation, many of them without any scientific criteria. Reinforced conditionality is an absurd scientific criterion, but as a consequence of these limitations, the sector becomes fed up, and then you have political parties, like in Holland, new ones that are a consequence of all this. And this is only because the industry is not being heard when the law is made. And I think there should be some degree of understanding. I'm talking about Brussels. Much of our law comes from Brussels. Okay, let's leave this topic aside. I will ask a last question, and then I'll open the floor for people in the audience to ask our participants. Last question is to Samuel. I'm sorry, Samuel, but I think you are the one who's fittest to answer. We are talking about how the European Union plans or creates structures the production of more sustainable food. But the EU cannot be an island in the world. It is not alone in the world. Are there any other mechanisms in any areas of the world that we can inspire ourselves on to commit to this sustainability? Because I think in the USA they have a tool that has repercussions on inflation. The Inflation Reduction Pact, I think it is called. Would this perhaps be useful as an inspiration? Well, they have their own deal. We have our pack. How do you see this tool? Well, this tool is basically about a package of incentives, fiscal incentives for the economy, for reducing inflation. In agriculture, the orientation of the American policies involve finding support in science to improve productivity, reducing the environmental impact of production. They have some initiatives that they have launched internationally. We've adhered to some of those initiatives because we share the philosophy. I think it is essential that we should base everything on science and technological advances, innovation, if we want to produce in a less intensive way regarding the use of energy, less energy intensive way. There are reports from last year from the OECD, for example, saying that in the next few years we need to increase productivity at a rate of 2.8% a year in order to manage to feed the planet within the so-called planet limit. This is twice as much annual productivity that we've had in the last years. So we need to increase this productivity, and this is only going to be possible through innovation and technological improvement. And in this respect, we need to continue to work, and we share the philosophy of the American continent as a whole, which is not believing that the intensification is bad or detrimental to sustainability. There is such thing as sustainable intensification. There are other less intensive ways to produce. Are there any questions from the audience? Any questions?
Ramos, es que yo la conozco. Pero te presentas, Cristina, para que te conozcan los demás.
Cristina Ramos, can you introduce yourself? Thanks very much. Congratulations on this forum. I'm Cristina Ramos from the Copiloto Agency, working for the plan, animal welfare plan, being executed by Spanish and Hungarian professionals, together with ProVacuno, Spanish association. I have two questions, one to Samuel, another for the other members. Samuel said at the beginning some things about the measures that would be taken to so that environmental requirements cannot be used as reasons in the environmental communications. You talked about possible measures to certify or guarantee these environmental values. My question is taking into account that only an accredited certification by a national certification institution is reliable, and taking into account that we could question the validity of certifications. To what extent will you validate a consensus on a certification or the possible accreditation of certification? Second question is to the other members of the table, because I would like to know your opinion. Do we believe that the European Union is doing its homework when it comes to citizens knowing the European production model, the differential values it contributes, and I'm referring to values like sustainability, environment protection, and in my specific case, the differentiating values of animal welfare. Samuel, as regards the first question, let me say that it is obvious, we see this every day, that there are sustainability elements interfering more and more in the publicity advertising of the products. So these claims get introduced, and we do not know if there is anything behind. Sometimes they use partial affirmations to induce a perception by the consumers, but very often there is no backing, no tangible backing behind. This has been detected in some of the Commission reports, and the Commission is working on a directive to put some discipline in these advertising practices for production elements of production, not just food. But we don't know the situation now. The directive proposal is, well, if you do publicity, it needs to be about the whole of the product as a whole, not just a part of it. And you need to have some way of bringing evidence to this. So it could be via an accrediting certification or maybe through a different means. This is at the beginning, at the starting phase. I don't know how it will be developed. But sustainability is beginning to be overused as a term. It begins to be everywhere without anybody knowing what it means. It is like a polyhedric definition. A product could be sustainable from the point of view of emissions, of CO2 emissions in the production, zero or negative emissions, but it might have from point of view of biodiversity or pollution, it might have consequences that are not sustainable at all. So defining this is something that is missing. There is an initiative that has been announced by the Commission, the Framework Initiative for Sustainable Inventory Systems, which aims at defining or beginning to define what is understood as sustainable in food systems. We don't know how it will be realized, whether it will be by the guidelines of the Commission or not. The EU does have some goal of leading this change in the field of the Green Deal. And I think this is praiseworthy. It should really lead by example. But it is, in fact, bringing about some doubts regarding the progress. The strategy director of the Commission acknowledged herself that the paces that the Commission is trying to bring about are not realistic to a large part of the agricultural sector. Any other person wishing to add anything? Because Cristina Yeah, animal welfare. Well, I fully agree with the intervention. I think that for animal well-being is something that the European consumers are not aware of. There are examples of countries preparing boats for things that we will not be exporting to send to the rest of Europe. And I was mentioning shooting ourselves in the feet. Why limit ourselves to certain kilometers? Some countries, like Austria, have 5 countries, the distance of 300 kilometers, but the situation is very different in Spain. So this is really damaging to us. And also, European consumers, they need to be informed that whatever we don't produce here will have to come from outside. A few years ago, we ran out of sugar. I remember Lucia only has one factory, a sugar factory now. So if we don't make a commitment to production, investing, we will be delocalizing the production. Thanks very much. I think we have another question.
I'm a land manager within agriculture and forestry, and also doing some work for the ELO. And I have one question you were talking about here. All of you have been talking about technology. And we need more technology and know-how to be able to be more sustainable. And I want to use the correct definition of sustainability as you were talking about. And the thing is then, to be able to do that, we also have to have a structural change within agriculture in Europe. And today the Commission is supporting the small farmer the whole time. But if we are going to get to use the technological change in the future, we have to give also a structural change. So it goes together, and I think the Commission is working in 2 different ways, saying one thing and doing another thing, or vice versa. And how are you going to look at that? I even heard yesterday from a friend here in Spain, you can't expand your agricultural land, or if you want to expand because you have more cows or something like that, because there are certain rules that you can't become larger. And we have to have a structural change, and we have to give the people food to a reasonable price that is sustainably done. Then we also have to be on the right level on the economic scale, on economies of scale. Why aren't you never ever talking about these things? Thank you.
Thank you. ¿Quién le responde?
Who is going to answer? Okay, I will launch myself into responding. Well, I agree that technological changes very often demand the size, the exploitation size, and not only that, but also enablement of producers. And one of the main challenges is being able to enable producers to tackle these changes. And I think this is one of the most difficult things to achieve. But I have to say that in Spain, the size of the lands, of the arable lands, is getting bigger and bigger. So the concentration process is taking place in a natural way. And of course, the profitability of the land is greater if the size is greater. So they're more efficient, they can produce at a cheaper price, etc., etc. But this also means that we need to continue to protect the small farmers, because they have much greater difficulties than farmers at larger scale. We need to help them. We need to give them incentives. We need to improve the possibility of association in all spheres. We have to bring them into the economies of scale via associations that allow them to use machinery jointly. But we cannot force a concentration, and we cannot leave them behind either. I don't think that is in the mind of any of any managers of the farming sector in Spain, not to especially continue to support the small farmers. Yes, because we have a little bit of everything. We have small, medium-sized, big farmers. We have everything. But it is true that in the Spanish CAP, we are the only country with super capping, limiting the payments in Europe. Whatever your arable land. It is the only country that established a cap of 200,000 euro. And then there are many payments that are regressive. The more hectares, the more the penalty that you have based on volume. So in addition to fighting towards a budget, or for a budget that has been frozen for many years, I've been going to Brussels for 15 years, and I've seen that we've had the same budget for almost 15 years. But as regards innovation, just to answer to your question, one of the only positive aspects of Green Deal is the new genetic techniques. There are members of parliament in the European Parliament that are bribing us, clearly saying, you could have this technology if you accepted the sustainable use regulation, for example, and you will not have 100% of the new genetic techniques, only some. Brazil has them, Argentina has them, the rest of the world has them. But if we have a positive thing, we should get it, but without conditions, because this technology is needed by all farmers, small, medium, and big. Thank you. Any more questions in the room?
Su nombre, por favor.
Hola, buenos días. Soy Emilio Navarro, de Friends of the Country of Spain.
I'm Emilio Navarro from ForumforAg Spain. Congratulations on organizing this conference. It's the second one in Madrid. I'm an agricultural engineer. I'm an agriculture farmer, stock farmer. I have forestry business, but only in Andalusia. My question, I'm also a trader of ecological seed, and Spain produces a great deal of ecological seed, but consumes very little. So we export to Europe. So I have the scientific topic very clear. As a technical person I am, Europe is moving towards clear sustainability, environment, erosion, pesticides.
But my
question?
En Brasil.
My question is about ecological aspects. In Brazil, there was a president of the Amazonia saying that if the population was hungry, he would continue to prune the forests. If the people could not live in a worthy way, the forest should be destroyed. So the question is in that line. Economic sustainability comes from price. Prices are very degraded because there are many imports from third countries without so many regulations as Europe. And then another one is via CAP and via pillar number 2. So as for the CAP, I would like to ask the lady from the Commission that, well, the CAP is like becoming more and more complex. This year, there's been a decrease in our family company of 35%. Pillar number 2 is eco-bio pillar. So every country legislates just as they want. Spain is legislating in a very poor way, and the farmers are thinking about quitting. Really, the same for Greece, for Portugal, Southern European countries. But let's move on to the question. So what's your opinion about economic sustainability in this sphere of production?
So due to your knowledge and experience, well, I think that it is very important what we were talking about at first, knowing from for the consumer to know what are the different values, and there's a gap between what is legislated and what is required, and the knowledge of the consumer and also the sacrifices done by the farmers. For example, in our specific case, we are advanced from this field. At this field, the first thing is communicated to other farmers that sometimes they do not know that technology or how to applicate that technology. And on the other hand, also tried regarding labeling and communication and all the value change to make the consumer aware and that the consumer knows that maybe that increases the price, and we need from them a personal commitment and to know them how the distribution works. But for me, as a professional in this field, related to the consumer, because I need to know the consumer in order to choose the olive oil, and they need to know what is the regenerative agriculture, the biodynamical olive, and people do not know that kind of technology. So at the end, there are many things that consumers do not know, and we need to create that evolution from society. As long as the society are not in the same boat as us, we will create that gap between what we do and what the consumer can afford or wants to afford. Well, in order to respond, we are talking about sustainability within the 3 pillars. And if one of these pillars are not, this doesn't work. So the first pillar would be economy and production. So sustainability would not be reliable if we do not focus on economy. So I agree with your intervention. If we do not have the tools, we cannot produce the cereal at the same way as the other countries. So, for example, I try with the soya at my land, and I couldn't produce the same way as the other countries. So without tools, we cannot produce. So there's a last question because we are out of time. Good morning. I am Robert Ratney, so I will do a quick question. We only have 6 years more. They will be different from this year, where we need to achieve the farm to fork strategy. And how can we do that?
También la quieres breve.
Your question is quite short, and I hope the answer can be short because it is not an easy one. I don't know if any of you would like to dare answer. I think maybe the question should have been asked to the people who were on the screen before. I don't know if I'm the one to answer. Obviously, farmers are at the core of the discussion. We've never been heard. We've never been asked. Things have to be made more flexible. This is incompatible with our agriculture model. We won't be able to fulfill. And as I said, it is not enough to look at Europe. We have to share with other countries. Europe cannot be so selfish. We cannot just produce performance when competitors are doubling our performance. We will need to search for new economies, profitability of the lands. So we will need to reduce part of this. Maybe when we have a different European Parliament, we need to learn from Ukrainian legislators. We were very happy in Europe, thinking that products just were produced in the fridge. And we've realized that is not the case. In wheat, we have 35% less price, but consumers are not paying less for bread. So everything has final results, and rethinking everything will be necessary. Samuel, you asked for the floor. Yeah, I think that the goal of the Green Deal and the Farm to Fork strategy are valid, are praiseworthy, are good for the society. And as I said a minute ago, what is more at stake is the pace, the how. But I think the Commission understands this, and in fact, it's a bit late in some of its proposals, but I trust that the common sense will prevail, and we will little by little implement the necessary changes to accommodate the goals of the Commission with the needs of the producers, the farmers. Just to conclude, we've talked about sustainability. Yes, in production and in trade, but with standardization, with differentiation, with scientific evidence, and with communications to the consumers. So that they take it into account when they have to pay. Thanks very much to the members of the panel, all of them. We were really happy to have you with us today. We break now for more than half an hour until 1:15. It's more than half an hour to interact, to do some networking. So let's go for that. Thanks to everybody.
Vamos.